Each year, a representative group of the graduates of the college, on behalf of all of the graduates, are asked to nominate a member of the faculty to speak on this occasion. This year's faculty speaker is Denver Brunsman, Assistant Professor of History. Professor Brunsman.
Thank you, and congratulations, class of 2013. It's a great honor to speak to you this morning. My day job here at GW, when not giving early morning addresses, is specializing in early American history in the history department. Among other courses, I have the privilege of teaching a class on George Washington at his home, Mount Vernon. One of the goals of the class is to uncover the human Washington, the man behind various monuments and statues that become so familiar in American life, especially living in Washington, D.C. One lesson of the class is that the private Washington was as impressive as the public figure, but he was not without insecurities, the foremost of which was his lack of a formal education. With the death of his father, Washington was catapulted into what we call the real world at a relatively young age. He missed out on the training in Latin, Greek, French, and music, and a range of other topics that was considered essential for gentlemen in the 18th century. As a result, Washington poured himself into making sure that his stepchildren and grandchildren received the classical education that he lacked. Later in life, he also had the dream of creating a national university in the Federal District of Columbia. He wrote about the university on multiple occasions, including in his will shortly before his death in 1799. In September of 1796, Washington described his goals to Alexander Hamilton of promoting education generally as one of the surest means of enlightening and giving just ways of thinking to our citizens, but particularly the establishment of a university where the youth from all parts of the United States might receive the polish of erudition in the arts, sciences, and belles letters. In 1821, Congress finally made Washington's vision of a national university a reality by creating Columbian College, which would later grow into the George Washington University. You are all the living embodiment of Washington's dream of a national university in the District of Columbia. Moreover, you have accomplished something that our beloved namesake never did. You've earned a college degree, not once, but twice, and in some cases, 3 or more times. In addition, you have gone beyond Washington's original vision of a liberal arts education and become true experts in your chosen disciplines. Your research, discoveries, and creative projects have helped to fulfill one of the charges of a great research university like GW, to create knowledge. The phrase creating knowledge kind of sounds like we sit around making stuff up all day. And although that might be the case sometimes, what creating knowledge truly means is contributing something new to human society and our collective knowledge. Your contribution might feel quite small, and in fact it might be small, but it's the thousands of small discoveries and contributions, when synthesized and amassed together, that help to move our society forward and improve the human condition. I have 2 children in elementary school, so one way I like to think about creating knowledge is comparing graduate level research work with the countless basic assignments that we all did starting in grade school. A classic example, which I'm sure many of you did, was some type of project on the monarch butterfly. And I think you know what I'm talking about. A chart or a diagram outlining the 4 stages of the butterfly's life, from egg to caterpillar to chrysalis, that cocoon, and finally to the beautiful adult butterfly that we all know and love. Well, I hate to break it to you, but your amazing work on the monarch butterfly in the 4th grade contributed absolutely nothing new to human civilization. That doesn't mean that it wasn't important. Those monarch butterfly papers and similar projects were part of your education and helped to make you the shining graduates that you are today. And deep down, we're all butterfly scientists. And just maybe some of you actually are butterfly scientists, in which case those 4th grade projects meant even more. All of you, regardless of your discipline or exact culminating project, have gone beyond the monarch butterfly stage to produce something that is original, that is both your own and that belongs to all of us, since we all stand to benefit in some way from your work. Let me end with one last image related to the graduate education process. The intellectual historian John Pocock once likened graduate school to an hourglass. Before you start, your intellectual life is more varied and resembles the upper bulb of the hourglass. Then, once you start graduate school, especially when you're completing an MA thesis or a PhD dissertation, your intellectual life becomes much more focused and resembles the skinny neck of the hourglass. Now, for the first time in years, for some of you, you can begin to imagine your intellectual pursuits broadening out again, like the lower half of the bulb. It may never be as broad as when you first started. After all, you're now experts in something, but you have a little more freedom to dabble. My own life after getting my PhD from Princeton University in 2004 involved a rather dramatic lower bulb experience. I joined the Army Reserves and went to basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, to become an infantryman. The Army was then facing a dire recruiting crisis because of the Iraq War, which I opposed. But I was moved by the daily profiles of fallen American soldiers, young heroes who had made the ultimate sacrifice, men and women who would never see their spouses, parents, and their own children ever again. I volunteered out of an idealistic, democratic, and perhaps naive sense that if our nation was mired in war, all members of society, not just the young and poor, bore some obligation to sacrifice. Well, to make a long story short, or a short story shorter, I was never sent overseas in my 8 years in the Army Reserves before receiving my honorable discharge this past January. I guess the Pentagon had enough good sense than to send a fresh history PhD to the front lines of combat. I have war stories, but they're all from training environments. During basic training, a private came up to me with his hand bleeding, and he said, "I heard you're a doctor. Can you help me?" And I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not that kind of doctor." But fortunately, I had paid attention in the class on treating a casualty, and I was able to apply a field bandage. I was proud to be the distinguished honor graduate at my basic training, but in a class of mostly 18-year-olds, it kind of felt like Will Ferrell's oversized character in the film Elf. I was very lucky that compared to so many, I only had to make small sacrifices in my Army service. One of these included never attending my own PhD graduation. Because of this, I have never owned or worn my academic regalia until this ceremony. So today, I feel like an honorary member of the class of 2013. Thank you. I hope you too will find a way to take advantage of your new freedom to explore that lower bulb of your intellectual hourglass. It doesn't require doing something so dramatic as joining the Army. Also, in exploring new things, you should not forsake the expertise that you've worked so hard to attain. When I joined the Army Reserves, my book project on sailors in the 18th century British Royal Navy was the furthest thing from my mind. But it turned out that the hours of tedium combined with intense excitement in the Army, the hurry up and wait principle, gave me empathy for the historical subjects that I was writing about, empathy that was really lacking before. In the acknowledgments to my book, I thank the members of my reserve unit in Fraser, Michigan, just outside of Detroit, for teaching me and for welcoming me, tweed and all, so generously into their ranks. I guess our namesake, who himself lacked a formal education, knew a thing or two about learning when he encouraged a liberal education for his national university. Just remember, once a butterfly scientist, always a butterfly scientist. I always hate to venture what Washington and the other founders would make of modern-day events like this. But one thing is clear, if he or anyone else from the 18th century attended a similar ceremony in their own time, they would commemorate it by exclaiming 3 huzzahs. And so I'd like all of us to do this today. Everyone up, parents, guests, we're gonna celebrate 18th century style with 3 huzzahs. Ready? Huzzah! 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 Thank you very much.